I get it. Standing in the music store aisle, staring at a wall of synths, you're trying to decide if spending a few thousand on a new machine is worth it or if you'll end up with a box of knobs you never really use. I was in the same spot last week, scrolling through demos, reading a handful of forum threads, and wondering if the MOOG Subsequent 37 would actually make a difference in my home studio workflow or just add another layer of complexity. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The big question with any analog synth is whether the hands-on experience translates into tangible time-saving and sonic possibilities for you. The Subsequent 37 promises ultra-powerful analog with 40 knobs on the front panel, a 2-note Paraphonic keybed, and a fairly generous set of modulation options. Those sound great on paper, but what does that look like when you're actually building a track, pulling patches on the fly, or trying to layer a bass and a lead without loading two separate units? That's what I tried to figure out before hitting add to cart. First, let's talk about the keybed. It's a 37-key, 2-note Paraphonic layout. In practice, that means you can play a chord with one voice while a second voice is doing a separate melody or a drone. For a producer who likes to thicken a sound with a simple interval, it's a clever shortcut. I set up a classic MOOG bass patch on the lower octave and used the upper voice to add a subtle, moving filter sweep on top. The result was a richer texture that would have taken two synths or a lot of post-processing to achieve. However, if you're after full polyphony for complex chord progressions, you'll quickly feel the limitation. The 2-note Paraphonic is great for layering but not a replacement for a true polyphonic keyboard. The next thing I tested was the dual oscillators plus the square wave sub-oscillator. Both oscillators are variable Waveshape, which gives you a lot of tonal flexibility without having to dive into external wavetable libraries. In a live jam scenario, I could switch from a gritty sawtooth lead to a warm, mellow pulse simply by turning a knob, and the sub-oscillator added that classic MOOG low-end punch. The downside? Because the oscillators share a single filter, you can't independently shape the timbre of each voice. If you need distinct processing for the two paraphonic notes, you'll have to compromise on the filter settings. Modulation is where the Subsequent 37 starts to show its depth. Two modulation buses, each with an LFO and a programmable routing matrix, let you assign envelopes, LFOs, or external CV sources to almost any destination. I used one bus to rhythmically modulate the filter cutoff with an LFO synced to my DAW tempo, creating that classic wah-wah movement on a pad. The second bus I assigned to control oscillator pitch drift, which gave a subtle analog detune that kept static pads from feeling too sterile. The routing is visual, but there's a learning curve. Newcomers might spend a few minutes just figuring out where to plug the modulation source and where it will actually land. Connectivity is another practical factor. The unit ships with MIDI In/out/USB, a inch TS audio in/out, and a inch TRS headphone jack. For a studio setup, the USB MIDI works flawlessly with most DAWs, letting you edit patches and control the synth without needing an extra interface. The dedicated audio in is handy if you want to process external gear through the filter and envelope sections, which is something I tried with a drum machine. The sound came out thick and cohesive, but you'll need a bit of patch cable patience to keep everything tidy. One thing to watch, the audio output is unbalanced, so you might pick up some hum if your running long cable runs through a noisy rack. The software side is worth a mention. MOOG includes an editor/librarian that lets you organize presets, edit parameters with a mouse, and even drag and drop patches to the hardware. It's a relief when you have a bank of sounds you want to recall quickly, especially during a live set. The software isn't a full-blown DAW plugin, but for a hardware-centric workflow it does the job. Just keep in mind that you'll need to run the editor on a computer. There's no iPad app yet, which might be a drawback for those who prefer a tablet-first approach. So, who should actually consider buying the Subsequent 37? If you already own a digital synth or a software instrument and are looking for an analog character that can be tweaked in real time, this is a solid upgrade. It shines for producers who like to sculpt sounds on the fly, jam live, or need that unmistakable MOOG low-end in a compact footprint. The two-note Paraphonic is a sweet spot for bass plus lead setups, and the generous modulation matrix offers a lot of creative routing without needing external modules. On the flip side, if you're a bedroom producer who relies heavily on full polyphony, or you're just starting out and feel overwhelmed by a panel full of knobs, you might find the subsequent 37 more intimidating than empowering.